Well, hello there, and thank you for tuning in to yet another episode of Working Musicians. Yes, the original Working Musicians podcast. And today is a wonderful day. Let me tell you why it's a wonderful day. Because I've had a great day. Got out of work a hair early, not a lot, just like a few minutes, Nothing quite like bailing out like 15, 20 minutes early. It's just early enough to where you probably shouldn't do it very often, but once in a blue moon, what the hell? It's not like I don't stay late all the damn time. And I'm on a salary, so it's extra awesome. Yeah, working 12 plus hours a day. How dare I leave 30 minutes early one day or whatever. So I left a little early because I needed to get out with just enough time to go look at some property. I'm interested in trying to find a house out in the country. I might move locations from my current job, so we'll see what happens. But if I do, I want to be prepared and kind of understand the area. So that was a fun ride with my two young children screaming in the back of the vehicle. I just now realized I have a third row of seating. Maybe we should put the kids' seats back there. It'll kind of make the screaming not quite as loud. It's better to have them screaming from 10 feet away than as opposed to 2. Actually, I think I might do that. That's a good idea. I don't know. I haven't thought about it before. Excellent idea. I think I'll do that. New Year's resolution, put kids' car seats in the third row seats, not second row. Done. So, went out, checked out a property. Of course, I loved it. Wife hated it. But, that's how that goes. But it was still a fun adventure. Now I'm back at my house. My kids are asleep. And I am podcasting. And I've been podcasting probably because I had a few trusted, tried and true Miller High Lifes. There's the proof in the pudding. Yeah, I've had a few Miller High Lifes. Although I'm kind of noticing something. Like, I've never really been so particular to any kind of beer, wine, or spirit before. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like I'm some raging alcoholic or that I promote irresponsible drinking, but, I like to have me one, two, sometimes 3 beers during the day after work. Usually, like, if I can, I try to have one after work, and then maybe a couple, 1 or 2 in the evening, that kind of a thing. But here recently, it's just kind of like what I do. I just buy Miller High Life. And while I still think it's a great beer and it tastes great and it's a wonderful price, I mean, you just cannot beat it. I kind of can't help but notice, and I think it's the case with anything, if you consistently drink one beer all the time, there's some good and bad that comes from it. The good is, like, I don't generally get any kind of hangover at all. I mean, sometimes I'll have another random beer. It's usually like one of those craft beers or something, or like a Busch. Don't recommend that. I may be a fan of cheap beer, but I don't care how cheap Busch is. Ain't not gonna do it. But I'll have some of these fancy beers. I'll have like one, and granted, they're usually a little higher alcohol content, but I'll feel a little dehydrated the next day. I won't feel so great. I can drink Miller High Life all night and I feel fine for the most part the next morning. Don't get me wrong. If I drink 12 of them, I'm probably in the course of 4 hours, I probably won't feel so great. But it won't be like that bad. But now it's like, it doesn't even faze me anymore, which is good. The problem is, it doesn't really get me drunk, like, at all. It kind of sucks. So I might have to start moving to like another high-end beer like Pabst or Milwaukee's Best. I don't know. I just might have to take a temporary break hiatus, maybe go to the Rolling Rock, something like that, just to kind of allow Miller High Life, just give it a little rest so it can come back and help me take the edge off and make my episodes even better. But anyway, just a tangent, just a small observation. It's kind of what's going on with me. But so I got back, and today, of all things, earlier, I know some people who are moving. They're trying to they're downsizing their house because they don't have kids anymore. They're older than I am, but So about 2 or 3 times so far in the last like month or so, they've just randomly, hey, you mind if we drop by and see if we have some stuff you want? And of course, this one guy, he plays guitar and has, he does well for himself. I'll say that much. So he's just trying to get rid of stuff, and he tries to sell it on Craigslist, but I don't think he tries real hard. Says, I couldn't get anything for it, so I'll just give it. If you want it, you can have it. I'm like, okay. So I got this like Schecter guitar, which is pretty badass. I might do a review on it at some point, but today's not the day. I got this little Fender amp, which is, so it's quaint. I might do a review on it, but today is not the day. But just here today, he brought over this like 65 watt crate amp. And I'm just like, oh gosh. So I went from having one very large Marshall amp that is missing a fuse, right, and then doesn't run, and a bunch of guitars that are like at least 10 years old, if not between 10 and 15 years old. Now I've got like, a fairly moderate, like, 4 or 5-year-old Schecter guitar and 2 4 or 5-year-old amps, good practice amps. So it's like, whoa, it's just crazy how that works. So definitely picking up some more stuff. It's fun. What I've noticed is it's funny. If you are a musician and you know enough people out there who know that you're a musician, it's amazing how much free stuff you'll get just because they know you'll appreciate it. You know what I mean? And I think that's a great thing. I've given away plenty of musical stuff because it's like, hey, I'm not using it and this person would appreciate it. Like that 20-year-old kid who is not having, 18, 19, 20-year-old kid real into metal, kind of one of those goth guys. I have a tendency to hire metalheads. I don't know why. Just if I can and they're the right person, I love it when I can find me a metalhead. And I've, for whatever reason, in my line of work, which is whatever it is, I tend to get quite a few metalheads. Sure, they got tattoos and piercings and weird haircuts sometimes, and sometimes some kind of weird personality quirks. But I found a lot of them are really good workers, so I keep hiring them. But every so often, I'll find one. They play guitar, and maybe they've had a rough patch in their life, or maybe I've had one that was older and started had to kind of start over his life at in his late 30s. So he got interested in playing the guitar again. I'm like, well, hey, I've got this old BC rich virgin widow. It's kind of like a Warlock, just a different body style, but you get the general idea. It's a metal guitar. It looks cool, right? And so, I polished it up, put some strings on it, tried to make sure it was all put together, and gave it to him. Now granted, it wasn't probably the guitar of his dreams, but it got him playing again. You know what I mean? He went and picked up a little, like a amp simulator for his iPad thing, put some headphones on it, and he was jamming. That got him. And next thing you know, he did that for a few months, got a guitar he really liked, and got a little amp he really liked it. But that kind of kept him going, helped keep him out of trouble, helped keep him out of some of the stuff he was doing in his previous life to make him go down. And it's just funny, that's just one example, and I'm not here to toot my own horn, but I've given away lots of stuff. And it's just funny how, you give things away and you don't have any expectations of getting something out of it other than the fact that you feel good by being able to help somebody or give something that you have very little use for, right? That's just sitting there. And sure, you could sell it for a little bit of money, but the value you get from giving it to somebody who will appreciate it is always a cool feeling. And so, it's just interesting how it works out. Like here I have all my electronic, guitar stuff or electronic guitar. All my electric guitar stuff's kind of old and dated. Now my Marshall amp is very nice. My carving guitar is very nice, but it needs some work, and they're not really functioning that well. And here I get some what I would call new stuff that I'd even pay for, just kind of out of the blue. So that's real cool. I just think that's interesting how that stuff works out. Every so often, just because you are who you are and you do what you do, people know it and they give you stuff. I don't know. Sorry, barroom philosophy going here. Take another swallow of this fine beer. Then I think I'm going to talk about what I'm going to talk about in this podcast episode. So I was thinking, so I got up into my studio room and I decided, I want to start, I really want to just spend a little time working on my dialogue quality, using my my gear just to try to get my sound better, because I hadn't really spent a lot of time on it. It's just kind of like, I mean, I know what to do. Maybe put a little de-esser on there because I have a tendency to be a little bit sibilant. Put digitally on plugins, put a gate on there, a little low cut off, put a little compression on there in parallel, in series of, what do you call it? Not parallel. Shit. Here I'm supposed to know what I'm talking about. It's what do you call it? In succession. Oh. Usually I'll put a couple compressors just in a row, take a little off here and then take a little off there so I can have a little more control. But it was okay. My audio quality was okay. Hey, you ain't paying for it, so, whatever. But I thought to myself, I can do better than this. So I got my studio set up in the upstairs room, which is finally where I've wanted it to be for like the last 3 years. Or 2 years, but I finally got it up here, and I'm like, you know what? I want to get this going right. And that kind of helped trigger my idea for this podcast. So I'm over here messing with the gate and the compressors and the EQ and messing with some few other hardware stuff and just seeing what sounds better, moving the mic around, different placements. And just through testing it, I realized, hey, you know what? Maybe I ought to just go ahead and knock a podcast out. You never know when I'll get to one of these and when I'm in the mood for it. I'm in the mood. I've had a couple of beers. I'm feeling good. Yeah, I got to go to work real early in the morning, but what the hell? I'll worry about that later. So I figured I want to do a podcast on something that I'm thinking about. Something that, here I'm currently working on how to deliver a better podcast. Maybe there's some things I can talk to you guys, the general public, about that I've learned about from doing a podcast, about how to do a podcast better than I started. Right? Just some general musings about the things I've learned about podcasting. One more swallow. Which just right then and there, I've learned that a good little thing about podcasting is it's actually not that big of a deal to stop and take a break and have a little dead space on the air, a little ambiance. Because when you're just talking, you've got nothing but dialogue working for you. You can get to the point where if you don't use a few little things like tools and tricks to kind of break people's attention or give them a second. Imagine being at a concert and songs don't really stop or end. They just keep on going. Imagine watching a jam band for 3 straight hours. Like you can't focus. You have to have something to kind of divide your attention. And sometimes just adding a little break or pause or saying, hey, I'll be right back in a moment. Just whatever. So you're saying, hey, just stop and think about that for a second. Come back in like 15 seconds. It's just kind of nice because it gives the listener a second to kind of clear their head a little bit and just realize, oh, wait, I'm kind of not paying attention, without saying, hey, you're not paying attention. You need to pay attention to what I'm saying because it's very important. Which, of course, what you're saying is probably not important, but, if you want people to listen, there's little tricks that you can do to help make it easier. All right. And some of these things I've learned not just from doing podcasts here, now I'm some 20 plus episodes in. So it's not like I'm that experienced, but man, I tell you what, you sure do learn a lot about doing this, every episode. And I noticed like my first few, it was fun, but geez, I'm telling you, you learn a lot just from doing it. No doubt about it. But I'll tell you what else. I've learned a lot just by being a listener to podcasts. And I think that if somebody's going to do a podcast, more than likely they don't know about it unless they've listened to them. So as far as that goes, don't do a podcast if you don't enjoy listening to podcasts. You know what I mean? I don't think you're going to be the one to break the mold. I enjoy listening to podcasts. I love it. Sometimes I'll watch YouTube channels because that's how they do it. Like I like to watch this guy called currently the last 3 weeks I've been watching Scotty Kilmer, and he has these YouTube videos, and it's cool because he's a Houston guy and I'm a Houston guy, and he's got this YouTube channel. He used to be on the news. He give you little car maintenance advice and stuff like that. But he's a real knowledgeable mechanic, real cool dude. He's in his 60s, younger 60s now. Not saying he's old, because he's in his young 60s and he's still rocking and working on cars, right? No lifts, he just does it. But he has a YouTube channel and there's not much to it. It's just him in front of a little camera. I'm assuming a cell phone with like a little, I think it's like one of those USB like Yeti microphones. He answers questions he receives on email and talks about them. So I don't have to really look at it, but that's just how he hosts his show, is on YouTube. And, I think it's a pretty good platform because it gives you something to look at, which I think helps a lot of people. I think there's a lot of people who are turned off to podcasts without video that are audio only just because they don't have anything to look at. And another good thing about YouTube is it's pretty much, maybe there's more to it than I know. I'm not a big YouTuber as far as uploader. I think I've uploaded 2 videos in my life. But as far as I know, they host all your videos, and I don't think there's like a limit on how much you can upload, which on a lot of other sites there is. Now, one of the only major pitfalls I've noticed about YouTube is that if you basically hit the home button and turn it off of YouTube, right? It seems like whether I'm in the app or whatever, basically, if you cannot put YouTube in the background. So like, let's say you want to listen, basically listen to YouTube in the background while you surf the internet or do something else. You can't. Basically, it has to be up in front. It will not be a slave program. It has to be in the front. Whereas I didn't do anything special necessarily, but you can stream my program. You don't even have to download the full episode first. You can stream the episode and hit the home button, turn the phone off. The screen is completely black and it's playing just like it was an MP3 or something. So while the YouTube thing is cool, because you get video and I think you get unlimited, or at least up to a certain extent that's very high. A lot of these guys on these YouTube channels, they've got a lot of content, so I don't think there's like a limit per se. How much they'll host for you. But the problem is it won't run in the background, which is, I wouldn't say it's a deal breaker, but it is kind of annoying because since you have to have your phone on and it has to be in the front, like if I'm watching my Scotty Kilmer car maintenance and repair instructions, questions answered, right? And basically sometimes if I hit a bump in the road, the damn thing turns off, then I got to look down and hit play. And it's not that big of a deal, but it's annoying. It's just not quite as ideal. And, whereas I can put on a podcast from most people, put my phone off to the side, let it roll around on the floorboard and it's fine. I can put it in my pocket while I'm at work, put in my little Bluetooth streaming earpiece, and listen, and it's not a big deal. So just something to think about as far as hosting. But that's maybe not the best place to start. So, really, I'm trying to think of where I should start here, because things I've learned about podcasting is, I think the best place to start is you need to, like I said earlier, you need to be an appreciator, an enjoyer, a listener of podcasts before you can really effectively do one. And I'm going to talk about some of the podcasts I've listened to and that I've liked, and just some of the things I've learned just from being a listener of podcasts. And one of the big things I've learned about podcasts are it's all about making a connection with your audience. Wow, go figure, right? And the one that really, really got me into podcasts was the Home Recording Show with Ryan Canestro and John Tidy. They had another guy, and all of a sudden, I cannot remember his name. It originally started with one guy who was on there for 2 or 3 episodes, if even. And then there was a guy named Jesse something who was on there for a pretty good while. I forget, maybe 50 episodes or something. I forget. And then after that, it was basically just John and Ryan, and they'd have guests on periodically and stuff like that, but the two of them just had this really great chemistry, right? And the one Ryan had a little bit better of a DJ, kind of a radio style voice, and he purposely hammed it up to make it sound that way. But they just had this chemistry and this dialogue that was really cool and entertaining. Hell, they could have been talking about, making scrambled eggs, and I would have been entertained. But as it just so happens, they were talking about home recording tips and that kind of stuff. And the show made it like 200 something episodes. Now, I'd say by the time it hit 200 episodes or so, the episodes started coming out a lot slower. And then hell, there was like a huge gap between like episode 249 and 250, and that was months ago. And it's one of those things. It takes time, and eventually, that as much as you want the show to go on, things have a start and they have an end, right? And they had a pretty damn good run at it. And I think that's what really got me motivated is these guys did this for 250 episodes, and they managed to do it in a way where they made a little bit of money, got a little bit of notoriety, but it wasn't huge. But the impact that they had on the audio community, and particularly the podcasting, they were some of the first that really got it up and running and real big. Now there's some other ones like Ronan Chris Murphy, who had a video channel, which, I subscribe to and I watch. And it's cool and all. I really like him, Dave Pensado. I like to watch it periodically. And the thing about Dave Pensado is it's a high production thing. He's got real sponsors and he's a big name. So it's not like he's lying to you or being dishonest, but you can tell that he's not always 100% genuine. And like, for example, he was interviewing Mixer Man. And I got such a kick out of this. As big of a jackass as Eric Serafine or whatever the hell his name is. If you haven't read The Adventures of Chronicles or Adventures of Mixer Man, you really should. It's a fine read. And so true. And you will learn so much, even though it's really not intended on its basis to be especially informative. It is. But you learn a lot from it. A lot of it kind of reaffirms what you already know. But the nice thing is it reaffirms it on a much higher level or scale than what a lot of us home audio guys are accustomed to. But anyway, I digress. But, here's Dave Pensado talking to Mixer Man. I forget exactly what the question was or what came up, but they were talking about how long it takes them to make a mix. And, and of course, Eric is like, hell, you take 2 hours if I can get to, there's plenty of times I've had to do 2 or 3 of these in a day. And it's funny. And then you've got Dave Pensado. Well, that's interesting because it takes me usually at least like 2 days to do a mix of a song, at least, if not, 2, 3, or 4. And Eric just kind of looks over at him and like, just kind of gives him this look. And here you've got this old goat, Dave Pensado, just straight faced. And you want to talk about a grandmaster of bullshit. I'm not saying it's not a good idea to spend 2 days on a mix. Basically mix it, come back with a fresh set of ears and a day or two later. And then, okay, what was I thinking here? But, usually you're done. You can do a mix in, if as long as the editing is done, hell, in 2, 3, 4 hours, no problem. But you got to imagine that somebody like Dave Pensado is spending on paper and billing his clients several days. And in all fairness, who gives a fuck? He's such a good mixer, he can charge whatever he can charge. And if I were in the market for a big name mixer for some, especially if I was in like the kind of pop R&B sort of genre, and I actually managed to get him to mix something for me, which by the way, he's amazing, an absolute legend, a god of mixing. Sure, whatever you need, whatever you want, just mix it, and I'm happy. I'll pay you what you want. You know what I mean? But it's just kind of funny, Here, Dave. What is it in the Sun Tzu's The Art of War? Pretend inferiority and promote his arrogance. You know what I mean? Just kind of funny. sure, yeah, you definitely can mix quicker than me. But in the meantime, I'm going to charge my clients 18 times what you charge yours because it takes me a week to do a mix where you apparently can do one in 3 hours. Good for you, buddy. I hope that works out well for you. So here Dave's charging $10,000 for a mix while Eric's getting like, $1,000. Yeah, you win, Eric. But, that's kind of my issue with that show is it's too politically correct. And that and Herb and Dave are just these fat old goats. And, it's just, it's definitely, they have some big names on it and I enjoy watching it, but I didn't really appreciate it until I got a chance to listen to an interview with Dave Pensado. I think it was actually on his show that they did an interview of him on his show, right? And I really started to kind of fall in love with the guy. I thought he was just really cool, but it wasn't until then that I really, really appreciated the show. And they've done quite a bit, and I love listening to a lot of the stuff. Now, I'm not so much into the layer things. I really like listening to the people he interviews, right? And you can tell this guy is a genuine fan. Like, he pays attention to other people's work. And you can tell I've seen it when he's interviewing with other people, he's a guest on their show and they don't really understand his work. And you can tell he's trying to be nice, but in the back of his mind, he's kind of politely offended because he goes out of his way to make sure he knows what other people are doing. And he's a big fan of other people's work. And he really, really takes pride in knowing where he stands against these folks. And then to have somebody, much smaller than him, have him be on their show and listen, you know what I mean? And they're not really familiar with his work. It is kind of insulting, I guess, to a guy like him. But I digress. But that's just another show that I like and appreciate. And that's about as big as a podcast. Hell, the thing's so big, it's probably on cable. But no, that's not just a podcast. That's like a TV show, only it's on the internet. That's about as big of an audio podcast that I know if that exists. But you know what? It's not my favorite. My favorite is still the home recording show. And there's a Joe Gilder who does like a home studio corner or something. There's a Graham Cochran. Actually, that's the guy I'm talking about. Dave Pensado was on Graham Cochran's show, and you could tell maybe Graham wasn't quite prepared for Dave. And there was a kind of awkward moment or two in there. But, they played it off well. But, hey, we're all emotional beings. But I noticed it. At the very least, I noticed it. Maybe I'm just over the top. There was another dude who did like Tech Muse Academy. There's a few of them out there, but the one I liked the best was Home's recording show because I really liked John Tidy and Ryan Canestro and the chemistry and just the entertaining. It was a good show, good format. It had some good information in there and a lot of stupid, fun jokes, and it was just very entertaining. And that's what really got me into podcasting. Not so much me doing it, but the listening to it. I just thought this was great. So, but I'll tell you, there's one thing that I have noticed about podcasting that it's just sort of the nature of the beast. It's like sitcoms or anything. There has to be a beginning and there has to be an end. And a lot of these podcasts that start, they don't really give themselves a chance because they don't even make it 10 episodes and they stop doing it. And I'm sure there's a lot of reasons why. It's not too hard. For me to figure it out, it's because they suck. But I think people expect things to be magically successful overnight. That's not how it works. Put it out and do your thing. Let things grow naturally. One person will discover it, they'll share it. Another person, you know what I mean? I'm not out there even actively promoting this. I don't care. If it's going to get big, it's going to get big. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But it'll never get big if I don't do it. Right? But that's not really the purpose of it. A lot of it's just learning, and I personally get a lot out of it, right? So that's kind of the reason why I do it. But I think a lot of people try to go about podcasting for the wrong reasons. In my opinion, you have to do it for the good of the community of people that you're attempting to serve, right? So in this case, kind of in the audio community, the musician community. Because if you're trying to get something out of this, you're wasting your time. You're just not going to get anything out of it. Success in podcasting is really more a byproduct of just doing a good job. Hold on. I got to turn off my speakers. 1 second. All right. Got that problem fixed. Like I said, any kind of success you get out of something like this is a byproduct of doing a good job because you enjoy it, right? If you don't enjoy it and you think you're going to make money out of this, guess again. Build a fan base and then worry about that. Until then, you're just playing with Monopoly money, right? But the big thing is it's got to be entertaining, right? Like I said, my favorite was Home Recording Show, even though it wasn't the biggest production value. And it really wasn't about the guests and everything. It was just about, to me, the chemistry between John and Ryan, even though they'd never met each other in person, and they even said as much on the show. They were two people who talked on the phone, worked through the internet to try to hey, I want to make a show about this. They were pioneers. They did a great job. They had a great span. And it's a shame that, it had to come to an end, but, it had to come to an end. And it was probably, they ended on a high note. You know what I mean? They ended at the high, they ended some of the last episodes are some of the best, So, hey, more kudos to them. They didn't drag it out till it was terrible. But, that's just an example of one that I really liked that kind of got me inspired. But that's what they did. Doesn't mean that that's what I need to do. And what I learned is that if you don't listen to other podcasts, you don't kind of understand some of the pitfalls that exist. And I could probably make this episode 4 hours long. So I think I'm not going to stop it here, but I'm going to kind of limit it to just some observations that I've learned from listening to other people's podcasts. Because what I'm realizing real quick is if I were to just talk about the stuff I've learned from doing it, I could make this a 4-part episode, if not more. So I'm just going to kind of talk about some of the things I've learned from listening to other people's podcasts. And, it's different strokes for different folks, right? And I mentioned the Home Recording Show, and it was kind of the pioneer of home recording podcasts, right? And what they did was great, but you really don't need to do another one like that. I mean, you could say, well, things have changed, but they haven't changed enough to really continue on. Now, I think that there are people who could go out there and do it and make it entertaining and make it informative, but they would have to have the right kind of chemistry, and they'd have to kind of put their own spin on it. You can't try to do a rehash of the Home Recording Show and expect it to work out. Yet, sure enough, I see people try to do that, and it doesn't work out very well, and they don't make it past the 10 episodes. Seems like making it to 10 episodes is a milestone. So I've made it to over 20. So I guess that's a good sign. But I think the thing is you have to have your own contribution to this. And if you're just going to do what others have already done, then that's good for you. And I hope you get something out of it. That's great, but I don't think you're really serving the community very well. Now, what I've noticed is that there are people who get very, very niche, very specific on what they're doing, right? You could say home recording is fairly niche, and it really is if you think about it. Like compared to what my show is, it's basically anything and all things music. There's not a whole lot of limits. Hell, I talk about barbecuing, you know what I mean, on my show, fixing cars. But that's not the highlight. But it's generally anything to do with music. I keep mine pretty vague because the principle behind my show is pretty much more so the Dris Organica stylings, the take, my taste on things and providing my own bit of flair on different musical issues, gear, philosophies, all this, that, and the other thing. Anything and everything music is up for grabs on this show. I purposely made it very broad because I wanted to be able to not be too niche, not to be too narrow, and be able to easily just think about stuff to come up with it without it starting to feel like rehash, right? Because what I've noticed is if your scope is too narrow, it's, how do I say it? It's, in some ways it's a good thing and in some ways it's a bad thing. It's a good thing because you have a very narrow scope. You know who your audience is, and you can do episodes and different podcasts of that are all in a certain kind of guidelines, and it kind of gives you a good recipe, right? Now, as much as it is a recipe for success, it's also a recipe for disaster because those shows can only have so long before they just get old, right? Now, the home recording show is kind of unique because, there's so much that goes into the home recording, and it wasn't just recording. It was mixing, mastering, live work, all kinds of things. But the truth is there's only so much you can do with this because just the home recording thing is fairly niche, whether you like to think so. And even they would admit it. They would say it was a fairly niche thing, but it worked for them. However, some people, and I think that was fairly niche, but they made it work and it was fine. But, it did definitely, because of how niche it was, and it really wasn't that niche, but niche enough to where it definitely made it to a point where it's like, I think they began to realize after about 200 something episodes, like, okay, the end is near, right? At some point, we're tripping over ourselves and just kind of doing the 2016 version of what we did in 2015 and 2014, right? And of course, they got busy, as people tend to do as they get more successful, which is fine. I'm glad they're successful. But the narrower your scope and the more niche you are, the fewer episodes you're going to be able to make while keeping it entertaining, that's fine. It's not a bad thing, but understand if you're very niche, you're going to be, there's a level of planned adolescence. Case in point, there's the mastering show by, hold on, what's that English dude's name? Ian Shepherd, right? And I probably listened to the first 10 or so episodes, and I'll probably catch up from there, but it was really cool. I liked it, but immediately I realized, man, I don't think mastering is a big enough topic to be able to create a very long-lived podcast. And I think he'll probably do it for another year or so, but at some point, that's when it'll kind of die. I don't think you can make it much past 40 episodes before it starts to get old, and not to say that he's not doing a great service to the audio community. He's not asking for money, and he's already a fairly kind of big name in the sort of internet scene of mastering engineers. But, he's got a decent enough voice for this. The show's fairly entertaining, and he definitely has very good insight. But we want to talk about a niche audience. But, he's got enough listeners to where, I appreciate it. But after about 10 or so episodes, I kind of fell off the wagon. Now, I'll get back on it, and largely because I got busy, but I just started finding other things that I found were more interesting than home mastering. Forgive me. Unfortunately, I've become more of a, if I dare say, a mastering engineer more so than anything. And I had no intentions of ever doing it. It's just sort of the kind of work that kind of comes to me. And I have to say, if there's anything I am the least prepared to do, it's mastering. That seems to be the most work that falls into my lap, right? So, definitely for me, it was great to have somebody like a show like that come out because I'm like, hell, that's the work I'm doing. And here's a show about it from a guy who definitely knows what he's doing. And it's cool and all, but hopefully he can make another 10 years doing this. I just highly doubt it. If he can get another 10 episodes in, I'd feel good about it. I'd say he did a great job to the audio community, but at some point, mastering is such a niche topic that it's just only going to get so broad. Right? So something to think about is with these podcast programming, that's great that they're adding to the community, assuming that they're actually in the market to add to the community and they're not just trying to get personal gain, and they're actually trying to put out a good product that does what they intend for it to do, add to the music community. But the more niche you are, just understand, the more narrow your scope's going to be, the fewer people are going to be interested, and the fewer episodes you're really going to be able to do. take another swallow from, I think, beer number 6 over here. Oh, we're about 38, 39 minutes in, and I'm about 5-6 beers in. So I'm going to start wrapping this up a little bit. There's still quite a bit more to say on this whole topic. Quite a bit more. So what I want to do is just kind of talk about some of the things from just a big picture sort of perspective that I thought about when I started making this podcast. I felt like there was a void in the audio podcast, musical podcast, because I look for this stuff, right? But I felt like there was a big vacuum, a void of just quality podcasts in regards to all things music, more so geared towards like kind of like the mixing, mastering, production side, with kind of like a focus on that, but with in gear side, but with a focus on music, on that, but with still an element of musicality, right? So I'm never just going to be specific to one thing. And I just thought, there's some things I wish that I know what's out there because I look for the stuff. And there's people who go out there and try to do stuff, but they don't make it very many episodes. And it's very obvious within their first few episodes that this is not going to be a podcast that's going to stand the test of time. And I think that's what people are looking for, is something that will stand the test of time. You start to get into something and then, 5 episodes later, it's done. It never comes back. But the other problem is that there's a lot of stuff out there, but there's very few of it can I really get interested in because it's just not very well done. I'm not entertained. I don't feel any connection to the person behind the microphone. And that's something I felt like I could do differently. And that's really been the big purpose of this. So this isn't talking about just about me, but like if you're interested in doing a podcast, regardless of what the topic is, you need to be able to be interested in it enough to be able to excite a community of people. Because reality is, whether I intend to do it or not, what I'm really out here doing is exciting a community of musicians. When I would listen to the home recording show, it would keep me excited. It was kind of like, to me, it was sort of like a dialogue of people who are really into home recording and that kind of stuff. It would help keep me energized and focused in the topic. And I like that. But when I don't have people out there that keep me energized and focused, I have to look for it. And when I don't find it, I tend to look for other things. And that's what basically happened to me. I just found that there was nothing else out there. So I'm like, geez, nothing's really entertaining me. I mean, Joe Gilder and Graham Cochran are great and all, but and what they do is great, but like I can mix already. I'm not really in the market for finding people who can teach me how to mix. Not to say I'm Dave Pensato, you know what I mean? I'm not Chris Nordalgi, but the point is like I'm not as interested in what they have to teach me, even though I think they are both better mixers than me. That's not the point. What's going to get me better is more practice, not more instructional videos. Because I think I'm past that point. I just need to practice more. Basically, less podcasting, less drinking beer, more practicing. But I've got to a point where I'm good enough at it to where like it doesn't really help me to be any better. And for me to be any better, I'd have to put a lot more effort into it. And I'm just not interested in doing that. Now, that's just me. And other people might look down their nose at me, but I'm just being honest, right? But I am at a point where I know that I know a lot about music as a generality, to where, and I've been doing this long enough to where I feel like I have a good standpoint and a good knowledge base to be able to help out a lot of people who don't know as much about this as I do. Right? And so that's kind of what got me going. Like here's some people who knew a lot about musical stuff that I didn't. I learned a lot from them. Not to say I know more than Ryan and John. I mean, hell, John and Ryan are very knowledgeable at the stuff that they really put a lot of energy into. And that's great. I learned a lot from them. I realized, there's a lot of people who learned a lot from them. And there's a lot of people who want to learn a lot from them. But if you want to learn a lot about the specifics of the home recording stuff, go listen to them. They're better sources of that. But So I had to find my own kind of voice in this. And what I found was, I want to put my own spin on this. I want to kind of touch bases on not just one thing or another, but a lot of things, and kind of put my own spin on them. Because the music is a huge, huge concept, a huge topic, and there's a lot there. So I'm not going to be overly niche. I mean, I'm going to continue to be very heavily focused on production of music. I think that's a big thing, but in the production of music comes a lot, you know? I'm more of a music production podcast, more so than anything, but I'd like to keep my scope fairly wide and my audience as wide as possible so that I can do as many of these as long as possible. I don't know, not to say I'll get to 250 episodes like Home Recording Show did, but hell, my goal is to do 100 of these before I even consider it quits. I want to be able to do 100 podcasts, and I think that's a reachable goal, but it's not going to happen if I keep it too narrow. So, just want to let you know, I have a goal, 100 podcasts. If I stop at 100 podcasts, I don't think there's any reason to be disappointed in me, and I have no reason to be disappointed in myself. That's quite a few, right? And I think I've done a great service to the community, right? Just by bringing the knowledge, bringing some entertainment, bringing some joy behind the mic. But just continuing on the legacy, building on the shoulders of giants, right? And hopefully others will take what I've done, take what others have done, and build on those shoulders, right? So when it really comes down to what some of the things I've learned from podcasting is really just what I've learned by listening to other people's podcasts, is if you go out for God, gold, and glory, you will not find it. Not to say you can't, that won't be a byproduct, but if that's your goal, you won't achieve it. If your goal is to serve the audio community, you still may not achieve it, which, God, gold, and glory. But the point is, if you go out there with the intention of trying to serve the audio community the way that they have served you, or any community that you're out there trying to podcast, right? You go out there and you really try to make a contribution to that. People take notice and they take interest. And that's really what it's all about, is building on the shoulders of the giants before you. So just realize that don't go out podcasting with the expectation or intent of personal gain. The idea behind this should not, in my mind, be personal gain. It should, because you get personal gain by doing it. Don't get me wrong. There is a certain level of personal gain that I achieve by doing this. I've learned quite a bit. Here I'm in my 20-something episode. I've got my dialogue, in my opinion, sounding pretty good. So I could replicate this, but I've learned quite a lot by doing this. I've gained the skill of being able to talk into a microphone without getting nervous, and I don't have to do really any editing. It's flat out great. This episode, no editing. The last 10 episodes, no editing. I might hit pause and and then record after that pause, just because something happens or I'm going to stop, take a piss. Somebody decides they're taking a shower in the room next door. Well, okay, I'm going to stop and come back later. But there's no editing. I'm using my cheap analog gear to make this work, right? And I'm happy. I'm happy to do that, but I'm getting better every episode. I'm learning a lot in the process. So it would be foolish for me to say I'm not getting anything out of it. But don't ask others to make this worth your while. If it's not worth your while on its own merit to do something to help others, and because you get something out of the act of just building upon what's already there and what others have already done for you to help give you knowledge, then you're in it for the wrong reasons. Now, if you would like to give me money, of course I will take it. I am currently accepting $1 million checks at drisorganica@gmail.com. Anybody interested in donating a large check to the Dris Organica Bass Boat Foundation, please send your checks to Dris, spelled Dris, Organica, Organica, gmail.com. Let me know. I can help make that happen. But if you're not interested in donating to the Dris Organic Bass Boat Foundation, just keep on listening. And I think I'm going to do a few more episodes on podcasting, at the very least one. But this episode is more so focused on based on just some of the things that I've observed as being a consumer of podcasts, and just some kind of things to look out for, and just some general observations. Hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I'll be talking to y'all next time. If you have any questions or concerns or feedback, please email me at drisorganica@gmail.com. I probably have my website or contact info posted on my bio screen, but I can't remember. Alrighty, y'all. You'll have a great night, and I will talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.